webinar today where we are focusing on federal and state resources that exist to help small businesses. My name is Miles Hansen. I'm with World Trade Center Utah, and we're very, very grateful for all of you for tuning in this afternoon and for all of our partners who are participating in this webinar today. Particularly grateful to Marla Trollin and her team at the SBA, who spearheaded a lot of the organizing behind getting this webinar up and running. We did one this morning and had a great turnout of, I think it was about 100 people that dialed in. We're doing this one in the afternoon. And then tomorrow at 10 a.m., I believe, and Hannah can correct me if I'm wrong, we're doing a third session. So go ahead and tell all your friends that weren't able to tune in this afternoon that they have another chance tomorrow to learn about these federal and state resources that exist to help small businesses right now. Right at the top, what I thought I would do is give a quick introduction about the governor's task force and our focus on that task force on maximizing the number of companies that benefit from federal programs and resources. I'll kick it over to Ryan Starks with the governor's Office of Economic Development. He'll share some of what the state is doing to help rural businesses. And then we'll have a chance to hear from Justin Anthony with Senator Lee's team, Marla Trollin and John Gigi with SBA, and Randy Parker with USDA about the various programs and resources. We want to make sure we save plenty of time at the end to answer questions. And so throughout these presentations for the first 30 minutes or so, please use the chat function, ask your questions. Hannah is monitoring that, and she will help moderate a discussion at the end of the program. So first off, I just wanted to talk a little bit about how the governor's task force is engaging to help small businesses access these federal programs and resources. We've all seen the news, $2.2 trillion CARES Act. We should get another $500 billion or so appropriated here in the next couple of days, focused specifically on small businesses. And our goal is to make sure that we small businesses across the state are able to access these resources. As part of the governor's task force, World Trade Center Utah was asked to organize a federal committee. And so we reached out to all of our federal departments and agencies here in Utah, including the Commerce Department, SBA, USDA, CBP, and Customs and Border Patrol, and others. Everybody from our congressional delegation, all of whom have been phenomenal at advocating for Utah back in Washington, D.C., as well as our key partners here in the state. And of course, that includes the Governor's Office of Economic Development and several others. As a group, and this was about 2.5 weeks ago, we recognized that there'd be two key obstacles for Utah companies to benefit from these programs. One would be access to information, and not just pushing out as much information as possible, because I think we're all suffering from information overload, but distilling that information down to key actionable points to make it as simple as possible. And so we have a team on the committee that is working very hard at becoming expert across all the different federal programs and resources. And they distill that down and are keeping that information up to date on coronavirus.utah.gov/business. So for everything we're going to talk about today, please go to the website, go to the federal resource section, as well as the state and local resource section, and you will see an overview of each of these programs, who is eligible, or what they are, who is eligible, and how you can apply or otherwise benefit from them. Everything we're going to talk about today, as well as many other resources as well. So highly encourage you to go and access that. The team is very active in keeping that up to date. They'll be pushing out another update here in the next 24 hours or so. And on a regular basis, they are monitoring that and keeping that website up to date. The other obstacle that we realized is just the challenge that companies would have to get very specific answers to their questions and to troubleshoot problems as they work their way through the process. And so we set up a rapid response team. It's now staffed with over 50 volunteers from 15 different organizations. That team is in place to help on a one-on-one basis Utah companies get their way through the process. The SBA, Marla and John and others created a scope of work early on for the rapid response team. As companies have reached out to the SBA, both to their public phone number and also their public email address. Many of those requests are being pushed over to the rapid response team so that they can respond to them, freeing up Marla and John and the team to focus on more technical challenges and just helping support the effort to process all of these loan applications. We also put a link on the coronavirus.utah.gov/business website. When you go there, you'll see a big link to submit a request for assistance from the rapid response team. You click the link, you fill it out, You put the nature of your problem or your question, and a member of the team will engage. And again, their job is not just to push out information. That's what the website's for. Their job is to solve problems and to provide solutions. And so you can expect to have somebody who will email, text, call, multiple back and forth, all the way up until the business receives the assistance that they need. The team doesn't have a magic wand. They can't, make the funding suddenly appear in your bank account, but they can make sure that they are providing good, sound advice, helping troubleshoot problems, and sharing some of the collective wisdom that we've developed as we've helped up to this point more than 1,700 companies through this rapid response team. So very much encourage you to utilize that resource to get in-depth assistance in everything you're doing. With that introduction, why don't we go ahead and Ryan, I know you have to jump on to another call here in a few minutes, but if you could go ahead and talk about the great work that GoEd is doing and how that can benefit our small businesses. And at that point, we'll go ahead and jump back into the discussion on federal programs and resources. So Ryan, over to you.
Thanks, Miles. And you did a pretty good job considering that you had to do this, run us through this morning. So nice job. I'm happy to be here with everybody. Appreciate everybody's participation. It really is a all hands on deck, and really grateful to be part of Team Utah. It's nice to see everybody coming together. So just wanted to report on a couple of things. First, the Governor's Office of Economic Development saw a need to really provide some small amounts of loan funding to small businesses to help bridge the gap until a lot of the SBA funding would kick in. And so thanks to our governor and our legislature and to our executive director, Val Hill, for the leadership in finding money, we were able to come up with about $11 million. And with that $11 million, we created two pots of funding, two rounds of loan funding for businesses. So we released the first round a couple of weeks ago, had an overwhelming response, and it was great to see so many people ask and inquire about this program. So what it does is it offers 0% loans of up to 5 years for small businesses. The criteria is you have to have 50 employees or less. And so we're able to crank out about 6 million of that $11+ million in about a week's time. From application to actually receiving a check in the mail, it's about a 10-day process. So we have a very hardworking team doing everything they can, working around the clock to make sure that we're helping these businesses. So then last week we opened round two. Round two also included nonprofit organizations. With this funding, we decided that we would earmark at least 25% of it for rural companies. And so just this morning, in fact, we were able to make the final funding recommendations. And with this round two, we funded 648 businesses for a total of just shy of $6 million. And of that, 33.9% went to rural businesses. So we're really happy, even though 25% was the minimum threshold, we're happy to see that number actually climb higher. 5.2% went to nonprofits. And we're actually sending award letters out today. The businesses then have to sign the contract. As soon as they do, we can send the check today and tomorrow. And then people should start getting them over the weekend. So in total, this bridge loan program awarded 1,149 businesses money. Approximately 15,000 jobs were aligned with these businesses. And of all the 29 counties, 28 of the counties had eligible applicants. So this money went to all corners of the state. So really happy about that. And then of the $12 million that we spent on the program, 3,667,000 went to rural businesses, which equates to about 30%. So while this is good, we realize it's not enough. And we're searching for more money. We're working with our legislature. We're working with our federal delegation to see if some money is earmarked for this program. And as we open it back up, as we get new funding, we'll certainly let each of our partners know. Speaking of the legislature, they went into special session last week, and they're meeting again this week. And with that, there's a few things worth noting. They reached out to our office and asked what priorities we had and what we thought we could do to help small businesses. And one of our responses is we feel like we really need to remind and encourage people to shop local, to have a business start its supply chain in Utah rather than go out of state for some of its supplies. So we're working on that. It could be branded as a billboard and a digital and a PR campaign. We're hoping to get some traction on that in the coming days and some more direction. But we just want to remind everybody that as we go through these difficult times, now's a perfect chance to support our locals. The other thing is we're working closely with the legislature to see if we can identify some funding to better support our SBDCs. We have a terrific network of small business development centers around the state. We also have a terrific network of business resource centers. So we anticipate that many businesses are going to go to these service providers seeking help, recognizing that they're in a difficult situation. So we want to empower our SBDCs and BRCs to provide the necessary services. So that's one of our asks. And then finally, we're working with our good friends at UAC, at the Utah Association of Counties. Collectively, we met with the EDA, the Economic Development Administration. They have some grant funding available to states to launch a new revolving loan fund program. And so UAC's championing this. They've put in an application for funding. If they get this will be a low interest loan opportunity for all businesses throughout Utah. And we'll keep you posted on that as well. And then finally, just wanted to report that there's a Senate Bill 3006 that's being considered tomorrow by the House. It already passed the Senate. It would provide funding to GoEd to administer a new program to provide relief assistance to businesses that have to pay rent or lease. And so we're working out the details, but basically if a business is struggling to pay its rent, they would apply for funding. We would administer that loan program and help them out. So again, that's SB 3006, and we should have more information in the coming days. So appreciate everybody's good work. That's my report, Miles, and I can stick on for another 20, 25 minutes and answer any questions that anybody has.
Great. Thank you, Ryan, for that. Really appreciate it. Lots of great work being done by the governor's office. Is all that information, the overview you just provided on the various programs, is that information on the coronavirus.utah.gov/business website under the state resources section?
Yeah, thank you for mentioning that. Everything that we're doing is going on to one of those pages. And so like Miles said, it's the coronavirus.utah.gov. And there's a little box for federal resources, state resources, and local resources. So we're trying to keep it up to date as quickly as possible.
That's great. Thank you, Ryan, for that overview. So now let's turn back to the federal engagement that's happening. Like I mentioned, our congressional delegation has been phenomenal. Just over the past couple of weeks since we set up this federal committee, there have been many, many times where everything ranging from very large companies to entire industries have had challenges to even the very smallest businesses that have reached out for assistance. And when we get that with our congressional delegation, I have been incredibly impressed with how quickly they jump in and do everything they can to assist. Justin Anthony covers business issues for Senator Lee across the state. He has been a phenomenal partner. So Justin, we're grateful for all the engagement you're doing. I would at the outset encourage everybody, when you have challenges, reach out. Justin can be a resource to help you get information, troubleshoot challenges you're having on any type of federal engagement. And Justin, I'd love to hear a bit of your perspective on the federal programs and resources that exist for our Utah businesses. So Justin, over to you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Miles. Appreciate that. And thank you to everyone for taking time to jump on the webinar today. Realize it's an extremely busy time and everybody's jumping between phone calls and emails, but really appreciative for World Trade Center Utah as well as the SBA for putting these on, because I think they're extremely valuable during this time. A lot of information coming and it's coming very quickly and changing by the minute. And so the more we're able to collaborate on avenues such as this, I think the better we're able to get the information to the businesses that need it most. As Miles had said, my name is Justin Anthony. I'm Senator Mike Lee's Business Outreach Director. I serve as the liaison between the business community and Senator Lee. Work closely with our legislative team, the Senator, our Chief of Staff, and State Director on any issue that affects businesses statewide. So certainly a busy time for that, but also a busy time for our office, as in the past, we very much travel all over the state, meeting with constituents, making sure that we're understanding issues here in the state so we can help the senator understand those, help our legislative team understand those. And with COVID-19, obviously our travel has become nothing. I mean, most of us are working from home. And so we've very much shifted to Zoom calls, to phone calls, texts, other webinar interfaces, to be able to continue to engage with Utahns, because we certainly want to understand what's going on, what the needs are of the community. Certainly Congress has passed now a total of 4 different packages in response to COVID-19, but our big question is, how are these affecting the businesses, and what can we do to improve these programs moving forward to help them better work better for the business community. And so part of that has been working with Miles on the Federal Resource Committee and the other individuals who are on this call as well, to ensure that the information that's going up there from the legislative side and from the statute side is most up to date as possible. So it's been great to work with Miles and his team, as well as the other federal resource partners, and would certainly encourage everyone on the call to visit the state's website, coronavirus.utah.gov/business, to see all of the federal updates as well as the state updates. Big emphasis, as Miles has said, on the federal side has been making sure that the information we put up there is not only up to date, but also easy to get through. We realize it's not easy to sit down and read through pages and pages of bill text. And so we want to go ahead, decipher that down, simplify it, and make it easy to comprehend as well. So really encourage you to visit that. As of last week, Senator Lee was appointed to the Opening Up America Again congressional group. This group will focus on advising and assisting the president in supporting local and state governments as the process for reopening the economy slowly begins state by state. Senator Lee certainly honored to serve in this working group, and certainly taking this seriously to ensure that Utah's voice is being heard on that, and that Utah's needs are being met. Anything that the federal government can do, we certainly want to make sure that Utah's voice is being heard. And certainly on that, we also wanted to highlight that we launched a interface on our website where you can go in and submit feedback. So if there are any questions, if there are any comments, any concerns, any advice you have, we certainly encourage you to go to lee.senate.gov and leave that information on there. We'd certainly love to hear from you. Final note, and I want to turn it over to Scott Albrecht from Senator Romney's office as well. But earlier this week, as in yesterday, the Senate passed an additional funding package that would provide $484 billion in relief. This was passed by unanimous consent. And again, Scott can go into the details on the funding side there. But Senator Lee actually flew back to Washington on Monday to interact with his colleagues who were in Washington, and really to highlight 2 concerns that he had wanted to make everyone aware of here. One was how the bill was written in terms of writing it in leadership and not bringing it to the Senate floor to have it debated and offer an amendment. So he sees multiple issues with that, including the idea that each senators represent different states, and different states have different interests. And when you write it in leadership, you don't have the opportunity to express those different interests. So that was one of the frustrations. And the other was the idea that we passed a bill of nearly $500 billion without a majority of the Senate senators even being in Washington, D.C. So he's certainly advocating and calling for his colleagues to return to Washington and continue to negotiate this and continue to look for ways to help the economy and help the American people recover from COVID-19. So with that, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Scott, but anything you need from our office, I'll go ahead and leave my phone number and email in the chat box. Please feel free to reach out, shoot me a text, give me a call, or send me an email. Always more than happy to talk. But without any further ado, turn it over to Scott from Senator Romney's office as well.
Hi, everyone. Grateful to be on the call. I'm the Central and Southwest Utah Director for Senator Romney. He sends his well wishes to everyone. We know this is a difficult time. He will continue to be a tireless advocate for helping small businesses and doing what the federal government can to help you through this difficult time. Most of you are aware of the Paycheck Protection Program. That was able to help 15 million Americans stay on payroll. So a very successful program. As Justin mentioned, yesterday the Senate passed a bill of $484 billion. 310 of that was going to replenish the PPP program. And so we're really excited to replenish that program and get that money to businesses so they can keep payroll going and keep those employees working. One thing that was new was that they added a $60 billion set aside for smaller banks or credit unions or other institutions that are aimed at serving smaller businesses or at-risk businesses. And so we hope that that will reserve some of that money and it won't be gobbled up too quick by the bigger businesses or the bigger banks. And so, talk to your bank about that, talk to SBA about that set aside money to see if you qualify for it. The bill will now go to the House and hopefully it'll be passed by the end of the week and the money can start flowing next week. We don't think that the House will pass it by unanimous consent. So, the congressmen are going to have to fly in and vote in person. So it'll take, today to do that. And then tomorrow they hopefully will vote on that. Another part of that bill was $60 billion that will go to the economic injury disaster loan. And Marla will go into a little bit more detail on that. But I will note that with this new bill, it allows farmers and ranchers with under 500 employees to apply for this. And that is a change, and that should be a huge benefit to a lot of our businesses here in Utah. The other thing I'll note is the USDA has a food assistance program that's a $19 billion program. $16 billion will go to farmers for direct losses. The other $3 billion will go for actually purchasing dairy products, vegetables, and meat products. We're still learning about this program. The details are still being worked out. From what I'm being told, this is kind of being rolled out state by state. And so we'll continue to try to get on top of this and advocate that we get this program here to Utah just as soon as possible. Lastly, I just mentioned that with the president's immigration ban, the H-2A program and farm workers are exempt from that ban. We're also still getting details on that, but that's what we're being told. So that should be a big help for a lot of our farmers and ranchers and small businesses here in Utah. So with that, I'd be happy to share my email in the chat column, and please reach out if you have any questions or concerns that we can help you with.
That's great. Thank you, Justin and Scott, for those overviews. Key takeaway for anybody listening in: you have a congressional delegation that is actively engaging and listening to the challenges our businesses are facing. You got Justin's email address there. Scott's going to put his email address in the chat function. Utilize that resource. And again, there's been several times where we've been able to engage directly with Senator Romney and Senator Lee's policy teams to help shape the way that they are engaging on behalf of Utah businesses. So they're listening, they're active, they're involved in the process. And that's an opportunity for all of us to make sure that we're providing helpful input as they work to refine and improve these programs. With that, let's jump into the meat and potatoes of why we've all tuned in today to learn more about the Paycheck Protection Program and the Economic Injury Disaster Loan. We're very grateful to Marla and John for their leadership on these issues. They have been working around the clock over several weeks to stand up programs that are immense in their scope. If you think about the original $349 billion that was appropriated just a few weeks ago, with the additional $310 billion, that's a $660 billion program that has been stood up just over the past few weeks. And so there have been challenges. None of this is easy. That's why it's a crisis. But there are tremendous resources available to help our businesses, and we couldn't ask for a better team here in Utah. And so John and Marla and John are going to go through the slide deck. There's a lot of detail there. We will email this out to everybody when we finish. And then again, as you're listening to this, feel free to use that chat function to ask questions. We'll dive in and we'll spend the balance of the time discussing answers to your questions, as well as helping you identify additional resources you can turn to get some one-on-one assistance. So Marla and John, I'll pass it over to you.
Great. Thank you, Miles. So as Miles said, I'm the director here for the SBA in Utah, and John Giggy is our district counsel on staff. And we really appreciate the opportunity to reach out to rural communities via these webinars. So thank you to Miles, you and your staff for hosting this along with the SBDC network. Really appreciate it. And to Randy Parker and Ryan Starks being such great partners to work with. And I also really want to thank our congressionals. We've been working very closely with their offices, and I know you all have been bombarded with questions just like us. So thank you for being a part of all this. So I'm going to quickly touch on the lending opportunities that we have and funding. It includes a grant as well. But I'm going to try to get through this quickly so that you all can ask questions of us. The CARES Act, as mentioned earlier, covers the Paycheck Protection Program, and most of you are familiar with that. It's meant to help small businesses get through this economic crisis that we're dealing with. And quickly want to touch on the CARES Act amendment changes. I know Scott already walked through this, but you can see it on the slide there. Additional $310 billion under the PPP, and $30 billion of that will be set aside for community financial institutions, less than $10 billion in assets, whereas the other $30 billion will be set aside for community financial institutions between 10 and 50 billion in assets. So we're hoping that that 60 billion in funding can better assist our rural businesses. 50 billion is allocated under the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program, and again, we call it EIDL. More money for the emergency grant, which is an additional 10 billion. And as Scott mentioned, they did include in this amendment agricultural enterprises as being eligible under EIDL, and that's 500 employees or less. So this is something new. Previously, they were not eligible to apply for the economic injury disaster loans. So the funding for the PPP, and I'm going to touch on this first, is administered through our SBA lenders throughout our state. We typically work with about 70 lenders across the state, and we have over 200 now lenders in the state working with us to administer this program. So we're grateful to all of them. The guarantee amount is 100% backed by SBA, and these loans can be used for payroll costs, which is the primary purpose. It can also be used for mortgage interest payments, rent, utilities, and interest on pre-existing debt. You can also use this loan if you are interested in refinancing your economic injury disaster loan. The eligible entities include small businesses, of course, but it does include agricultural businesses, so ranchers and farmers are included in this program. It also includes tribal businesses, nonprofits, 501c3s, veterans organizations, sole proprietors, independent contractors, self-employed individuals. But keep in mind that you had to be in operation on or before February 15th. The size standards are typical 500 employees or less. We also look at the industry NAICS code that you're operating under. And so in some cases, you can have more employees on staff, but we'd have to analyze that. The number of employees would include full-time, part-time, and other, but not independent contractors in that calculation. The affiliation rules are waived for businesses with multiple locations, and we're also waiving the rules for franchises listed in SBA's franchise directory. The ineligible entities include financial businesses primarily engaged in lending, as well as passive businesses owned by developers and landlords, life insurance companies, pyramid sales, gambling with 50% of the total revenue, and private clubs and that kind of thing. It also excludes businesses that are engaged in illegal activity, of course, Any businesses where 20% or more of the owners are dealing with legal issues, or businesses that are currently defaulting on their federal loans or prior loss to the federal government. The loan terms is different than the EIDL. The PPP loan goes up to $10 million. We look at it based on a formula. So it's going to take into account 2.5 times the applicant's average monthly payroll costs over the last 12 months. And for those businesses that have been in business less than a year, we'll look at the average payroll costs for January and February. The maturity on this is not near what it is on the EIDL. It's only 2 years. The interest rate is 1%, and there are deferment payments of up to 6 months. We have a lot of waivers under this program. We're waiving the guarantee fee, the annual lender fee. We're waiving credit elsewhere requirement, which is different than the EIDL. We're waiving collateral and personal guarantee requirements, as well as prepayment penalties. The forgiveness benefits is probably the most important part of this program. We're looking at an 8-week period from the initial loan disbursement from the lender, and we'll take into account the actual amount spent on payroll costs, mortgage interest, rent, and utilities. Borrower must supply documentation, including payroll tax filings, state filings, verification of mortgage and utility payments, along with a certification from its representative. And keep in mind, again, the whole purpose of this program is to keep employees on the payroll. So in order for forgiveness to take place, you want to have at least 75% of the requested amount used for payroll purposes. And then a couple of examples here. If a business reduces its number of employees during the 8-week period that we're looking at, then the amount of forgiveness will be reduced. So keep that in mind, as well as employers that restore their employment numbers and salaries by June 30th, they will not have any reduction in their forgiveness. So the next loan program that we have to offer is our economic injury disaster loans. As I said, we call it EIDL. These are direct loans through SBA, our Office of Disaster Assistance. Businesses eligible for this are similar to the PPP. Again, small businesses, private nonprofit organizations, that kind of thing. And there is the credit elsewhere requirement for this. So again, different than the PPP. The loan terms, this goes up to only $2 million versus the $10 million for the PPP. The interest rate is also higher for this. It's 3.75 for small businesses and 2.75 for nonprofits. But the maturity is much longer. It goes for 30 years. And then there is a complete payment deferment for the first year. The proceeds can be used for a variety of different purposes. It's a little broader in general. You can use it for fixed debts, payroll, accounts payable, and other bills that couldn't be paid because of the disaster's impact. But it may not be used to refinance long-term debt. The requirements, again, no credit elsewhere. So this is, like I mentioned earlier, different than the PPP. You must have an acceptable credit history and be able to demonstrate that you can make the payments. All loans over $25,000 must be secured with available collateral. Part of the EIDL program is this emergency grants, and it's something like what we're calling an advance, an EIDL advance, basically. So when you go in to apply for the EIDL, you can click now a button in the portal to apply for the emergency grant. This grant goes up to $10,000 per business, and we take into account $1,000 per employee. It covers a period of January 31st through December 31st. And we're trying to get the funding issued within 3 days of application. That's kind of the standard that we've set. I know it's been a little behind the Office of Disaster Assistance in terms of getting that funding out, but they're doing their best to try to meet that standard. If you get your emergency grant, again, that's forgivable. You don't have to pay that back. However, it will be subtracted from your EIDL loan. So in other words, if you're you're requesting an EIDL loan for $100,000 and they have already given you the $10,000 up front, then your loan will be for $90,000. On the screen here, you can see the portal that you can log into, COVID-19 relief at sba.gov/#. Again, this is the portal you want to go into to apply for these loans, and make sure you click the button for the emergency grant. The next slide just includes our contact information here in the district office. Again, the rapid response team that Miles mentioned earlier has been helping us out a great deal, really helping to keep us afloat, quite frankly. I think Miles mentioned they had about 1,700 inquiries. A lot of those are related to SBA. And so we were very, very grateful that we have that team set up to assist us. So we do have our main line. It's 801-524-3209. And again, the general inquiries are referred over to the RRT, or the rapid response team, whereas we're handling more of the technical inquiries on our end. You can also email us at utahgeneral@sba.gov. And then I included the Office of Disaster Assistance contact information, which is listed there. And again, if you want to just have a general question answered, you can go into the coronavirus.utah.gov/business, fill out a quick little form, and the rapid response team will get that back to you right away. So with that, I think we'll pass it back over to Miles.
That's great. Thank you, Marla and John. Appreciate that overview. Before jumping into questions, we have Randy Parker with USDA on the call as well. Randy, I know that there are many specific programs and resources for rural companies and ag producers. Could you give us a quick overview of a few of those before we jump into our questions?
Absolutely. Thank you, Miles. USDA Rural Development, I'm the state director here in the state of Utah, and we are rural specific. For example, most importantly is we have eight offices in different locations around the state, and our staff are open and ready to do business. We're doing business differently now. We're doing it online. Second thing in the introduction I'd like to point out is the most up-to-date information for USDA and our rural development programs is available at rd.usda.gov/coronavirus. I will note that again at the end of my presentation. I want to talk about our three major areas of focus. The first one of those is rural housing and continuing to help rural communities with affordable housing. We continue to do business and close on houses out there, but under the coronavirus situation, some of the things that we've done to change that and be helpful to our borrowers, single family housing, direct and guaranteed loans through the banks that we partner with. There is a 60-day moratorium on eviction and foreclosure, and then an additional up to 180 days of forbearance to work with those people that are struggling because of the coronavirus. Our multifamily housing partnership with those banks and individuals that are USDA financed, we've increased the amount that we provide to our tenant for vouchers in their relationship with those landlords. Eviction and penalty protection for non-payment or rent is in place now, and forbearance. We will provide extensions to our property owners, those that are working with their tenants, to give them additional time. Under our rural utilities programs, as an example, our sewer and water programs where we work with communities, RD loan guarantees through banks. The lender may offer 180-day payment deferrals to help our communities. We also have extended deadlines on our telecommunications and our electric programs. Our rural business cooperative service programs, our business and industry and rural energy for America loan guarantees, we have deferred, we have a deferral available there for up to 180 days. And we've extended application deadlines for a number of our programs. Now to what we have, that we have the ability to focus on through the CARES Act. Our business and industry guaranteed loan program, we received an additional $1 billion in lending authority so that we can then increase our repayment terms for our borrowers are up to 10 years. Our loan repayment may be deferred initially up to 12 months. And then even at that, we may be able to extend the terms up to 3 additional years. Under the RD program guarantee, lending guarantees, those things that are eligible for loans would be payroll, healthcare expenses, rent, lease, utilities, and that type of business expenses. Now from connecting rural Utah and rural America, that includes last mile to farms and ranches in the state. Our Reconnect program has received an additional $100 million for grants in addition to what we received last year, $300 million. And the priority there is to fund companies, businesses that had applications when we ran out of money. That $100 million will help fund that. Our distance learning and telemedicine grant program, we received an additional $25 million to add to the $70 million we already had currently available. This is to help communities with distance learning and telemedicine. And those application, that window has been extended, is now open from April 14th to July 13th. Those are the main things that we have that we're working with rural communities. We're excited to partner with the state and with SBA and help get us through this crisis. And again, the website for the most up-to-date information would be rd.usda.gov/coronavirus. Thank you, Miles.
Great. Thank you, Randy, very much for that overview. And before we turn to questions, very briefly, just want to identify a couple more resources that any businesses that are either engaging internationally, whether you're exporting, importing, part of your supply chain, have received or looking to receive international investment, or you're in a position where you'd like to think about that. We want to make sure that you are aware of some grant resources that World Trade Center Utah administers in partnership with the SBA. The first is the STEP grant, or the State Trade Expansion Program grant. These grants range from typically $2,000 to $10,000 to help accelerate growth in international sales for Utah companies. Right now, we're all under a lot of challenging circumstances, and so these can also be used to help retain sales in other countries. We also provide free consultations, market research, and through our global network, we can provide, we can pretty much open up any door that you need internationally. So maybe you've got a manufacturer in China that's gone offline, or you've had challenges, you need to find somebody else. Or maybe it's a distributor somewhere in Europe. Please reach out, let us know. We can help make the introductions you need. We can help do some of the research for you, provide advice, and then provide grants to help offset the costs of doing this international engagement. We also are organizing with our partners a webinar series. After we finish today, you'll get an email where you can provide feedback on this session, as well as you'll have a list of all the webinars we've done, looking at tax issues, looking at payroll challenges, looking at sick leave for your employees, looking at having expertise from China and India other key markets. We're doing some on the United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia next week. And so we want to make sure that we are providing content that's relevant for our businesses. We've had a great turnout thus far, and you can find recordings of all of those topics. And if there's anything that we haven't done yet, please let us know, because we'll organize a webinar so you can dive deep and get actionable advice on the key issues that you are facing. So with that, let's turn to the questions. Hannah, you've been monitoring the questions coming into the chat. I know people email you as well. I want you to go ahead and run through the questions, and then all of us can weigh in based on the topic. So Hannah, over to you.
For sure. One of the most common questions that we receive from webinars like this is, how can they check the status of their application, and should they reapply with this new funding coming available?
Okay, so it depends on which program you're talking about. If you're talking about the PPP program, of course, they're dealing through a lender, so they should check with their lender to see if their lender has any information on whether the lender has gotten that application into SBA, and if they have they heard back from SBA, et cetera. On the EIDL side of things, there's no real mechanism for checking the status. You can contact the customer service number that I put up earlier. I saw somebody indicated, yeah, they've gotten the grant but haven't heard on the loan. Be patient. There's a lot of these. They've been flooded with applications, so they'll get back to you. If you applied for the EIDL before March 29th, you do need to go back in and do it again. It's a quicker process. It will tie back to your original application.
Great. And is the EIDL grant taxable?
As I typed in the chat, I'm not sure about that one. I know that the CARES Act has provided some tax concessions for various aspects of the different programs implemented under that act, but as far as the EIDL grant, I don't have that information in front of me.
What we could do there is, if whoever had that question, if you could take just a couple minutes and submit that to the rapid response team, they can do the research and they can get back to you the specific information. I also want to, since taxes came up, just in a very high level, amplify what John just said. As part of the CARES Act, there were many changes that were made to the tax code, temporary and retroactive, going back to January 2018. And so I just want to flag for all the small businesses on the call, or anybody who's working with small businesses, that you should get with your accountant, your CFO, whoever your CPA is and does your taxes, and go over those changes, because there are some changes that could get cash back through a refund by amending your prior year returns, as well as things that you can do now, especially in Q2 with payroll tax deferrals. So very briefly, there were some changes in loosening of restrictions on carrying forward losses from previous years. Those, again, go back to January of 2018. So if you can go back, look at your 2018 and 2019 returns, if you could benefit from those loosened carry forward, loss carry forward clauses in there, then you can amend your 2018, 2019 returns, and then the IRS will provide an additional refund from previous years. You can also write off the full cost as depreciation of any qualified improvements to buildings that you may have done since January 2018. And again, you amend your returns, and that's cash back to you just as quickly as the IRS can process that. The third element there is you have an opportunity to defer your payment of payroll taxes. Now, it's not writing them off, so you still will have to pay those, but that 6.2% that you pay on top of your payroll, you can wait paying that, defer that until 2021 and 2022 without penalty. And so as you look at cash flow right now, and cash flow is a major issue for every company, those are three ways that you can leverage these tax changes to help ease some of your cash flow challenges. And again, if you want to get more in depth on any of those, reach out to the rapid response team, and they can track down more specific answers to you, as I'm sure the tax professionals that you've got a relationship with.
Perfect. Another question about EIDL loans. So just a clarifying question, they're capped at 15,000, but then you can also get the 10,000 grant on top of that, or is it included?
No. So they're not capped. The loans are not capped at 15,000. So there's a lot of confusion with that. I think what ODA was trying to do, the Office of Disaster Assistance, was trying to allow an earlier amount of money to go out while folks are waiting for their full loan to go through. So in other words, they could get the emergency grant and then they would give them an additional $15,000 to kind of tide them over while they're waiting for their full loan to be processed. So the EIDL is not capped at $15,000, just to be clear. And again, that funding should be coming to small businesses relatively quickly. It's just the entire loan package is taking a little bit longer to process.
Okay, thanks for that. This is a question about the PPP, specifically about the outdoor industry. So if a company has been awarded PPP and they work in the outdoor industry and it's kind of dependent on tourism, and so they haven't been able to pay payroll because there haven't been any tourists, even though they've already received funding, how do they go about that without failing the forgiveness requirements?
So yeah, the clock does start ticking on that 8-week period. The whole idea behind this program is to get people back on the payroll and get them paid for these few months until everybody's able to get back on their feet. So they can still start to pay those employees. Maybe they can't come to work or whatever, but you still put them on the payroll, you start giving them paychecks. I've also seen other businesses getting creative in what they're doing. For example, I heard from a business that said, well, I'm going to pay 6 months of health insurance benefits in advance so that I can get this money expended so that I can be eligible for the forgiveness. I don't want to give any specific advice on how to do that kind of stuff, and not sure whether all of it flies or not, but again, check with your lender that you're working with, check with your accountants, come up with some creative ways of how you can start spending that money now.
Yeah, and the other folks you'll want to talk with, I think, is the SBDC network, the Small Business Development Center network, located throughout the state. I mean, they're there to help you with your businesses in terms of planning, so they're of assistance.
Perfect. Is there anywhere that companies who have received this funding for PPP can find more information, specific information about what it can be used for? And will they be able to seek additional help in the future if needed?
Go ahead. Do you want to get that?
Well, there's all kinds of information available on the coronavirus.utah.gov website that we referred to earlier. The Treasury Department's website, they have information.
Our district office.
And also, to get more information here locally, we've mentioned the Rapid Response Team over and over again, our SBDCs, our district office, we provided that information. So if you have any specific questions, the actual use of proceeds for the PPP is fairly simple. It's the payroll costs, it's mortgage or rent, utilities, and payment, refinance of your idle debt.
And one thing that I'd like to mention is that you guys can get signed up to be on our newsletter distribution list, and we're providing updates routinely through that Gov delivery list. So please just contact us, reach out to us, and we'll get you signed up.
And hey, John and Marla, I just would be curious to get your thoughts on another common question we receive. A lot of businesses, they're in the PPP process. Many have been funded. Many more have applications approved and will be funded once this additional money is appropriated here end of this week. What advice would you have for companies now on what type of record keeping they should make, how they should handle these funds to make it as easy as possible on the back end to submit the documents to the SBA they'll need to submit in order to be forgiven for the parts of the PPP loan that are forgivable?
Right. No, thank you, Miles. That's a good question. So I know I mentioned this earlier, but what you want to start doing is pulling together your documentation for the forgiveness portion of this, including your payroll tax filings, your state filings, verification of mortgage and utility payments, and a certificate from a representative. Those are all going to be required when you go and apply for the forgiveness portion of it. The application itself is fairly streamlined. In fact, we have a fillable form that we can send small businesses in advance if that's needed. I don't believe any of the SBA lenders are taking applications, up until they actually get the funding. In fact, they're not really supposed to. But if folks want the application in advance, we can provide that to them.
But Miles is right. Payroll records is really the key component of this. Up front, you need to get it together for the last year. If you haven't applied for your loan yet, be getting those records together. Then for the forgiveness portion, you're going to have to be keeping track during that 8 weeks. I know a lot of companies use payroll processing firms. If you do, it's pretty easy. If you don't, you're going to have to dig in a little deeper yourself.
Perfect. Next question is, can you get both PPP and EIDL?
Yeah, thank you. That is a good question. So you can get both loans, however, they cannot be used for the same purpose. So the PPP is going to be primarily used for payroll costs. Again, 75% of the requested amount should be used for payroll costs if in fact you want that forgiven. However, the EIDL can be used for other purposes. And so what I'm recommending to businesses is, go out and apply for both and do it soon because the funding's going to go quick. I didn't realize it was going to go that quick, but clearly the money goes very, very quickly. So get your applications in as soon as the EIDL portal is back up and running, and the SBA lenders are offering the opportunity to apply. And, like I had mentioned earlier, if you do have an EIDL loan and it is used for payroll costs, you can roll that over and refinance it into the PPP so that you get the forgiveness on that.
Great, thanks. This question is kind of a follow-up to one that we've already answered about how do they apply for the additional funding if they've already received the EIDL grant but not the loan. It seems that they haven't been able to put in a request for how much of a loan that they'd like to apply for. What should be their next steps?
Okay, so it's all just one application process for the grant and the loan. So they go in and start applying for the loan. They check the option for the grant. You do not put a specific loan amount in because the Office of Disaster Assistance will figure that how much you need based on the financial information that you provide. So no, it's not like a usual loan where you request a specific amount. And there's no additional steps to take to apply for the loan. You will have applied for the loan. You just need to be patient and wait for them to get back to you.
Perfect, thanks for that. And the last question we've just received is, where can you get a list of the items needed for EIDL, such as the paperwork, so they can start gathering that together and get that application in?
I haven't looked at the Office of Disaster Assistance website lately, but I think it's listed there. We've got a list of it. We can post it. If they'll send us an email at the Utah General at sba.gov, we'll respond to that and give them. There's a list, and it's not very extensive.
Great. What does no credit elsewhere mean for the EIDL?
It's kind of a fluid type of analysis of whether you have credit available to you elsewhere on reasonable terms and conditions. So they'll look at the overall circumstances of what kind of access you have to lines of credit, or, but usually credit's not going to be as available as it is on the terms that the EIDL loans are available. So I think they've lined up on that requirement just a little bit. And so basically there's not a hard and fast rule. It's based on the overall circumstances, but.
And just a re-clarifying question, for the EIDL loan, if you put in that application, is it before March 29th, you'll need to reapply? And then if it's after March 29th, do you just keep the same application in?
Yeah, so just to clarify, what had happened is SBA revamped their portal for EIDL to make it more streamlined for applicants. And part of that process is getting funding out more quickly to small businesses. So what headquarters has told us is any any small businesses that have gone in to apply before March 29th should go back in and reapply through this streamlined portal, click the button for the emergency grant money, and then wait to get their loan more quickly. Now, they will still be in the queue from their original submission date. So they're still going to get processed based on whatever their application date was prior to that end of March cutoff.
Okay, that looks like we are unfortunately out of time. I think there are a few more questions there. Hannah, if you could take a look at those last couple questions that came in, and let's make sure that we answer those by email so that people ask them. Very quickly, in terms of additional information, again, we've said it a million times, but let's say it one more time, coronavirus.utah.gov/business. There is some information there on these tax code changes that are part of the CARES Act. If you follow the links, you can get more information there. And then feel free to reach out if you've got additional questions. If it doesn't go deep enough, reach out to us. We'll make sure that we connect you with people who can provide some more information. With the tax code changes, they do get very technical very quickly. And so I would strongly recommend that you work with whoever is preparing your taxes or working on those for you to reach out, because they will be able to answer very specifically for your business what would apply and provide the quickest and easiest way to benefit from them. But I would strongly encourage everybody to take a look at those, spend a little bit of time, just because it's something that we haven't been talking about enough across the country and in the news. So we want to make sure that companies have those, because they can be a quick way to get some additional cash into your business here shortly. And again, just to conclude, thank you to all of our partners for all the work that they are doing to help small businesses. Thank you to all the small businesses that tuned in today for all the work that you're doing. You're the backbone of our economy. We want to make sure we're plugging and supporting however we can. And for everybody who tuned in today, who is working with companies, either the small business development centers or other economic development organizations, please reach out if there's anything we can do to help you activate your network so that we get as many small businesses here in the state as possible benefiting from these programs. So with that, thank you again for everybody for tuning in. If you feel like you want to watch a rerun of this, tune in tomorrow at 10 a.m. or go ahead and pass that information on to others who you think would benefit. And expect to see an email from Hannah with these slides, as well as a link to a survey. We'd love to hear from you on what type of information will be more helpful in future iterations of these webinars. Again, thank you to everybody. I hope you have a great afternoon.